Hello, and welcome to the fourth grade curriculum preview for science. Today we're going to briefly talk about the third 6 weeks, Unit 3, Earth Cycles and Systems. As always, we're going to start off with some key planning documents, so you want to have these handy either to refer to later or when you start your planning, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the pacing guide, the unit overview, and the vocabulary and the clarifiers. So let's take a look at some of the challenges for scheduling instruction for the third 6 weeks, and that really comes in working around our 2 breaks that we have for Thanksgiving and then for Christmas. So we've got about 26 days of instruction or class periods of instruction planned for the third 6 weeks, and those are really chunked up if you take a look into 3 kind of chunks. So the 6 weeks starts on November 14th, and we've got about 5 days, and we have a day scheduled for administering the CBA on one of those days, and then we have our Thanksgiving break. We come back on November 28th, and then we have 13 full days until Christmas break, and then we come back, we have 8 days. So just something to keep in mind. This is a really challenging 6 weeks to plan instruction, and let's take a look at the pacing guide and see maybe a couple of strategies and ideas. So here we have the pacing guide for Unit 3, and we've got it divided into 3 different chunks as well. We've got 3 content standards this 6 weeks, and if you look over here to the right side of the screen, you'll see those 5, 13, and 8 days put together. So as always, the pacing guide is a general suggestion, and the 5 days, the 12 days, and the 10 days roughly fit in with those 3 chunks that we have here. Even though we only have 3 content standards, we have several process skills that are partnered with those, and something else to keep in mind is that all of the content standards in 6 weeks are very important supporting standards for the 5th grade science star. So it's going to be important to, even though we're a little bit of a crunch time planning around those breaks with the students, we need to really pay attention and make sure that maybe we look back at our data and make sure that we're lingering longer where we need to support students a little bit more, or maybe pre-assessing to see really what their biggest needs are so that we can efficiently navigate and use our instruction days the most efficient way that we can. I just wanted to remind you about a document that you might find helpful as you're planning out a unit, especially when it's challenging as this one with the schedule, and that's our Planning for Learning Protocol unit document. I've attached this in Canvas under the video, so if you would like to go there and get it, or it's also on the staff page when you look into resources. But this is something that I find to be helpful, and had several teachers remind me that they really like to use this when they're trying to plan out the 6 weeks unit. So just wanted to remind you that that's there, and it's in Canvas if you'd like to take a look at it or use it. Okay, so let's take a look and see what's new to your 4th graders this 6 weeks. Over on the right side, you'll see the overarching process skills that are going to be important no matter what content standard we're looking at. And that's going to be use of graphic organizers, lots of models, data, inputting, and then using the data in tables and charts. So those are kind of the overlying process skills no matter what we're studying we'll want to incorporate. And let's look at the new content that we have. So brand new for your students is making predictions using weather maps, symbols, and keys. So that's a brand new skill for 4th graders. Last year in 3rd grade, they were just starting to practice recording and graphically representing weather data. So your students are going to take that a step further and go into predicting using that information. They're also going to be diving into the water cycle, and specifically they're going to be describing and illustrating. So again, paying attention to those verbs. Your kids should be describing and illustrating. Illustrating can be with drawings. That's kind of the most basic way to start that. But they can also graphically represent that by creating a model. And they're going to focus on the movement of water above and on the surface of the earth. So we'll talk a little bit more about that particular standard, but there's a couple of resources that I think will help support and clarify that a little bit. We're also going to be focusing on the role of the sun in the water cycle. So these 2 bullet points are kind of related together, but they're going to be talking about the sun is the source of energy that drives the water cycle for evaporation, but also lack of thermal heat in processes like condensation. Finally, they're going to be collecting and analyzing lots of data by looking at different patterns with shadows, tides, seasons, appearance of the moon over time. So with all of these content standards, you can see that they all actually tie into the sun. That's kind of an overarching theme that your students can maybe use as an anchor. I think the only content piece in here that really doesn't directly tie to the sun is just the tides right here, and of course tides are caused by the moon. And so that's going to be something that I think will help make this a little bit more concrete for your students. So let's talk a little bit about the water cycle and about some of the resources in the unit overview that I have to help you. The unit overview has pretty detailed notes by standard to help you clarify and make sure that you are really clear about how deep and the scope of the experience that your students should have with a particular standard. So I pulled out two little snippets from 4.8b, and both of these are from the unit overview. And so here I talk a little bit about how difficult it is with abstract concepts and give some analogies to help your students to make that a little bit more concrete. And also just a reminder that students should experience a variety of models with the water cycle. So we want to get away with only representing it 2D with that classic poster or diagram on paper. That's fine for a start, but we also need to have students making or seeing 3D models, acting it out, writing the steps, and so forth. So to help clarify what we have as far as resources for that, we'll come over here to the actual resources for this standard. So here's the whole standard. And in STEM scopes, there are some pieces in there that are really great fits for that overall. But in AIMS, what I've done is I've actually taken some of the lessons that I think specifically are strong key connections for that and given you some notes on that. So if we look at CBA data overall, we see that sometimes in fourth grade we have a hard time understanding condensation and identifying that outside of the water cycle. So for instance with droplets of water on the outside of a cold cup. That's part of the water cycle, although it's not necessarily happening up in a cloud. So there's a lesson that really helps students identify that outside of the water cycle as well as within that context. I've also included some visuals over here on the other side here to help support your students experience the water cycle in a variety of different models. So we actually have a 3D model. There's several of those in your science lab. And then these are some of the AIMS representations that I've listed there in the resources. So there's one where students create a water cycle in a baggie and they put that up on the windowsill. There's another one where they can make one out of a 2-liter bottle. There's the classic water cycle diagram, and then there's a kind of a little foldable, flappable cycle that they can interact with a model kind of in a 3D method. So just a couple of points about that just to kind of help you with planning. Okay, and as we wrap up, I just want to remind you about a couple of key points for vocabulary and then assessments. Let's start with vocabulary first. Just a reminder that you always want to check with the clarifier for the list of words right over here that go with that particular standard. And I want to encourage you to try an interactive word wall if you haven't done that yet. When you are finished with this video, there's a just-in-time video that's about 15 minutes long, and it's an overview of Dr. Julie Jackson's presentation that she did on our District PD Day on October 11th that gives you an overview and a starting guide to get started on an interactive word wall. So if you were able to attend one of Dr. Jackson's sessions, you'll find it to be a nice review and then just having all the resources in one place. And if you were unable to attend her session, I've really tried to design it so it makes a good frame for getting started and you get kind of the idea of the basics and then first place to start. Next 6 weeks we'll have a little bit deeper view of interactive word walls, but I encourage you to kind of jump in and get started, and I think you'll see the benefits and your students will very quickly. With assessments, just a reminder that STEM Scopes has an assessment bank and it has all the released items from STAR. So I mentioned that our content standards are supporting standards for STAR. So you can go into Standards Unwrapped or to the assessment bank and you can see what those will look like on STAR. And that's perfectly fine for you to use those for your summative assessments or just show your students maybe the rigor and level that they're going to be asked about that next year. Okay, and just a couple of final thoughts. You have a lot of abstract concepts with your students, and they can be really challenging to teach as well as for your students to learn those. So just a reminder that we want to try to give them a variety of experiences. That kind of goes back to that variety of models with the water cycle. We want them to be spending a lot of time down here in this part. If we only give them this view up here, we're only going to reach about 10 to maybe 30% of our students. So the more layers or lenses that we can give, the better. And a final thank you to all the teachers that have been jumping in and participating in the discussion boards, as well as that October 11th Padlet feedback. There was a section in there in science for SOAR in science, which highlighted some new pieces and some cool stuff in STEM scopes. So if you'd like to go back, you can go back into the October 11th and see what the teachers found really resonated with them. So thank you if you participated in that. And I also want to thank you if you've been participating in the discussion boards. Every 6 weeks, of course, we'll have our curriculum preview. And then there'll always be a place for discussion, or maybe I'll post a question, but there's a way for us to each learn from each other, as well as ask questions to me or other teachers, and you can get that real-time feedback. I will check those every day, and so I'll be looking for questions and maybe extend the conversation a little bit. And then finally, if you're looking for some face-to-face time, either with your coordinator or your colleagues, I want to remind you that we have every 6 weeks something called C3, and that's some time that we've set together so that you can have time with resources or other people as you see that you need it. And that's an optional way for us to support your instruction. And you'll find those dates in workshop, and then we also send out an email blast as well. Final little bit, if you stuck around to the very end of the video, I just want you to encourage you to go back into Canvas, and you're going to see one more video from me, and it's a little surprise. It's a little prize for fourth grade teachers this 6 weeks, and it's about a 4-minute video on a science cut up activity that I have for you. So if you'll watch that video, it'll explain how to get that science cut up for you, and just a little extra way for me to show my big love for my fourth grade peeps. Have a great 6 weeks, and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye-bye.